Welcome, everybody, to the MC65 FM podcast, the podcast where we explore the technologies, architectures, and people shaping the Microsoft ecosystem. When most people think about Azure SQL Database, they think about tables, transactions, store procedures, reporting, and reliable data storage. But what if the database could become an active participant in modern application architecture? What if Azure SQL could securely instant the REST APIs, trigger automated process, connect with external services, support AI applications, and help orchestrate intelligent workflows without requiring a large amount of external application code? That is exactly what we're exploring today. My guest is Dirceu Resende. I hope I spelled it right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, he's a specialist in databases and business intelligence who has been working in the data field since 2013. Nicole previously worked at Microsoft as senior program manager for Power BI and is currently an Azure cloud administrator at Ryanair. He is also deeply involved in the technology community and has presented at more than 50 in person events and over 300 online events. He was a part of the uh, Palhaneiros, Brazil. I don't know. A YouTube channel with more than 160,000 subscribers and 10 million views. His website contains over 400 technical articles, has received more than 4 million views, and has become one of Latin America's most widely access Portuguese language resources for data professionals. Today, we discuss Azure SQL Database, REST API integration, security, automation, AI, architecture patterns, observ- uh, observability, and the changing role of database inside modern applications. The crew, welcome to the M365 show.
Well, I thank you, Mirko. Thank you for everybody that is listening to us. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope we have a very good chat and people can learn about uh, Azure SQL DB and all data technology that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, before we deep dive into the topic, can you a little bit tell about yourself and how did your career in data start, especially in the Microsoft ecosystem?
hmm Yeah, sure. So I'm 39 years old right now. I started with technology maybe 20 years ago. I started with computer maintenance. Most of people at that age started with something like this. The IT was not as evolved as it is right now. It was just baby steps at that time. I always had a lot of interest into programming, so I started with programming and coding. Um, then I when you code, usually you have a lot of contact with databases because pretty much every application starts with a, interacting with the database, like inserting data, managing data, and so on. And I really liked this experience. I was very passionate about studying a little bit of performance because I'm a very I like very much this topic, but on both application side and also on database side. And I really enjoy this part of the database performance tuning, especially because, at least in my point of view, it's easier to test than in an application that you need to code, you need to test, you need to deploy, you need to build. In database, you just need to type F5 and that's it. You can just run uh, what you're trying to do. So if I create a procedure, a function, I can just run in one line of code. With an app, usually you have to build way more stuff to test than a database. So I I I get know more about database. I started to study them to understand better how it works. I study other topics, not just like performance, good practice, developing better solutions with database because sometimes you have to write a lot of a lot of code, and the database already has a solution for it with in a way more efficient way. And then after uh, you have quite a good experience on the database itself, I think I reached this point in 2017, 18, more or less. It when Power BI became very, very popular, and a lot of people from database background were migrating to business intelligence. AI was at the beginning of AI, machine learning, and so on.
Mm,
So I thought that it was a good idea at the time. I believe it was a good idea right now, but it was the beginning of uh, professional business intelligence. Business intelligence is very old, but it was not that high demand that it is in the last maybe 10 years. And this is when I got into working with business intelligence, Power BI, warehouses, and other technologies. And this is what I usually do on my daily basis currently.
mm.
And that's my summary.
Awesome. You previously worked for Microsoft in a senior program manager for Power BI. Can you tell us a little bit about, yeah, this what this role does, and how it's, yeah, how this help you connect to the global community?
Yes, definitely. I think it was a very good experience to my career. I learned a lot of new things that I was not used to because this role of program manager, especially at Microsoft, uh, you're not very deep connected in terms of um, hands-on. Usually, you work more into create specifications and requirements for features that the developers, the code developers that will implement on the Power BI tool or the engine. So it's not all my career. I I I was on the other side that I was receiving the requirements and actually trying to create a analysis service cube, create a pipeline, implement a security mechanism on a database. So when I joined Microsoft, it was the opposite way. So I was writing the requirements to
Mm,
other people to implement. So it was a very different experience. I can say that. Um, it, I think based on this experience and all my other experience in my career, I'm still more into actually hands-on, more technical person implementing solutions than writing the requirements. I think it's a whole different area. You need to have a whole different mindset because everything needs to be very, very complete, perfect written to other person to read that file, that document, to understand. And you need to think and try to cover all the possible different ideas that somebody can have. So you need to try to cover everything. So the feature delivered is exactly what you thought when you create the document.
mm,
It's a little bit different when you can use your own creativity, your own ideas to implement something.
mm. Awesome. Um, you are now a specialist for the Azure SQL database. For someone who not has not followed the platform closely, how would you describe Azure SQL database today?
I think is a if you need a database and you don't want to have any headache in managing backups, performance, having to concern in terms of ransomware, virus, and a lot of security um, threads that you may have. The Azure SQL Database, is a PaaS platform. You just create it with uh, just some clicks on Azure portal, You have a very professional database, so you can use it. You have a lot of different tools already available for you. And also, you have the power of SQL Server that has been one of the leaders of the market in the last 20 days, 20 years, for sorry, in the last 20 years. And you have also a lot of good and very useful stuff like you can now make HTTP requests, so we can integrate your database with pretty much any service or application directly without needing an application to control this workflow. So from the database, you can connect to, let's say, ChatGPT API, use this API with the data you have on your database and process data, make post requests to change data on other services. And you have a very good job application on the database that can help you to schedule and automate process. So it's a very complete database that provides you more than just a regular database. You have a lot of different features, a lot of different features for performance, for maintainability. You have a lot of different tools to better integrate your application with the database. In terms of security, if your application is hosted on Azure, you can have manage identity, which is a very secure approach to connect an application with the database because it's a passwordless approach. So we don't have a password to manage to rotate or just somebody try um, to get and attack your application.
Mm,
So I think it's a very mature database for pretty much any application right now.
yeah, and where does the Azure SQL Database fit alongside Azure SQL Management Instance and SQL
Uh-huh.
Server?
Yeah, the managed instance, the experience in the managed instance is very similar what we have with the on-premise SQL Server
Mhm,
database because you have an instance that can hold various databases. You have the SQL Server agent that you can control the jobs. You can publish and create SQL CLR procedures using .NET code, which is very very powerful. And the difference from the Azure SQL DB is that the SQL DB um, you're working on a single database. So
mhm,
it's very useful, especially for microservices, because you can have multiple smaller database independents. And so you're not sharing resources with other databases and other applications. You can
mhm,
have one server with a lot of different databases, but each database can have a different capacity with a different pricing, and also they are totally independent.
mhm,
So if you have an application that you need to use, let's say, cross query databases, so you need to create a join that you need to join tables from different databases, the best tool for you is going to be the managed instance. If you don't have this scenario, you really want to have totally different and independent databases, especially for microservices approach, then the Azure SQL DB should be your best option right now.
mm, awesome. And can organizations move existing database to Azure SQL without changing the surrounding architecture?
It's possible, but depending on how the application was designed, it could be a problem, especially because most of on-premise applications, it's not it's very common to have linked service to other instance or to have cross database queries, to use, let's say, um, SQL CLR procedures or functions using .NET code, which is not supported by the SQL database. Um, so if you have some features that are not supported, you can have some problems, especially because depending on the tier you're using, could be slower than the tier you have on the on premise, because the cloud, the easiest solution you have, the most expensive is going to be. So if you have a managed service, probably is going to be more expensive than um, your VM or your physical server on your company, your data center. But definitely with the managed service, the experience will be much easier, and it's gonna be way better to maintain because you don't need to be an expert to create and maintain a SQL database. But if you have an on-premise database on a critical production application, then you need to have someone from networking, from security, for that understands a lot of tuning, performance tuning. You need somebody that understands about storage. So you need to have a lot of different people working on to maintain and to maintain an on-premise application. On cloud,
Well,
it's easier because a lot of responsibilities uh, Microsoft holds for you, so you don't need to maintain everything.
Mm, yeah, storage is a good word. Your central message is that Azure SQL Database can extend far beyond traditional data storage. What does it mean in practice?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Yeah, yeah. The Azure SQL database can extend far beyond the traditional data storage. Can you a little bit explain what it means in practice?
Yes. So if you have yeah, if you move your data from the on-premise SQL Server to an Azure SQL database or a managed instance, because you're already on Azure, it's gonna be way easier to integrate with different application and also different servers. So let's say you have Fabric or Power BI,
Mhm.
or if you have an application using app service or Kubernetes or Docker, it's way easier to access this data than if you have this on premise. You can have also Fabric mirroring that you can replicate this data from the Azure SQL DB to Fabric seamlessly in a way easier way than having to create a job that copies on a schedule job to Fabric. Also, because you have always the latest version of SQL Server, you have always the latest new features, especially the SP Invoke REST endpoint, which you can use to call HTTP requests and integrate with different servers services. The SQL Server 2025 got this feature, but on Azure SQL, they you could do this in I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and people that are using the on-premise only got this year. I think this year. I think it was in the last quarter of 2025 actually that the 2025 version was released. But people that are using the SQL DB got this way earlier than people are using the on-prems.
Okay. And what does it mean for databases to be participate actively in an application workflow?
Well, the database for me it's the most important part in an application because if usually the code is versioned on Git. So if let's say somebody hacked into the application and they destroy the code, destroy the resource, you can easily create a new. You can easily create the application again on a new resource on a new server, getting the code from Git. But if somebody destroys your data and they also destroys your backup, they probably most companies can go bankrupt. They can end because they don't have any data anymore. If you don't have a very good backup strategy, like having this stored into different storage types, uh, this could be the end of the for the company.
Mm.
So it's very important to have this integration, deeply integration with the application, and also to The database needs a special attention on it because you can version code, but you cannot version data. So data is pretty critical and pretty important.
Awesome. Um, I think are we moving away from the traditional idea that the database should remain isolated behind the application layer?
Yeah, no, no. I agree with this approach. I mean, usually the application is open to internet, so you can access if it's not an internal application, you can access from any public IP. Usually, it's open, but database is usually behind a firewall, a virtual network that only on a private VNet can access the database. So it's a very good strategy, trying to protect and reduce the surface area for to try to attack the database. But nowadays, the databases is not just a place to store the data. The database can do way more right now because even in the past, because when you install, for example, the SQL Server, you also get the analysis service, which is a OLAP tool, the integration service, which is an ETL tool, and also the reporting service, which is a pixel perfect tool, just like Crystal Reports.
Mm,
So you have this since 2005, I guess, or 2008. But now with these integrations with the possibility to automate jobs and to create automated executions, to integrate with different services, different apps, to integrate with AI. So we can use right now AI to actually process the data that you got from the application.
mm,
Now the database can do much more than it it was used to a few years ago.
mm,
Uh, so the database now can be more independent from the application.
mm,
Definitely, the application usually is the main source of data for the database, but now we can have more sources. I can create a job that queries data from an external API stored into a database,
mm,
cross the data with the data that came from the application. I also can get the data from the blob storage that the user uploaded Excel file and process all this data together without needing an application to actually orchestrate all this data flow, for example.
mhm. Uh, uh, what the new possibilities become available when Azure SQL can securely communicate with external services?
Yes. So first of all, the firewall will be our first first barrier in terms of security. So if you can um, block external traffic from your database, you already got rid of most of the problems you can have.
Mm,
But you can also have other tools like, let's say I created an integration with an external application. So I created a new user for this application to access the data. If this application is accessing sensitive data, I can use dynamic data masking to mask that data. So even if somebody can compromise this credential for this application, it will see masked data. This dynamic data masking is not that secure because you can definitely, if you have the credential, you can try to explore using simple select commands to try to guess the original value. Even if you cannot see, but I can guess. Let's say I have a salary column. I don't know this value, but I can try to guess. Oh, let's see if it's below 10K. Okay, it's below 10K, the monthly salary. Let's see if it's below 5K. No, it's not. So it's between 5 and 10. So I can try to guess. But you have also other features like column level security. So you can hide certain columns from a table from a specific credential. You can also have column encryption, which you can actually encrypt the column. You can have also always encrypted, which is probably the most secure um, technique you can apply to a SQL Server database, which you're gonna have a private and a public key to encrypt and decrypt the original data. So even the DB, if the DBA doesn't controls this key, even if the DBA is a sysadmin, it will not be able to see the original data because this person doesn't hold the key for it. So it's probably the best approach for it, but it's a little bit complicated to implement because you have some limitations. Um, it's hard for an application to not able to see the actual data, so it can break some applications on it. So you need to prepare. It's not just a setting that you turn on and that's it automatically encrypted and the application will just work fine. So we need to create a project. You need to study a little bit of the limitations. You need to adjust, test your application to see if it's going to work. Um, but you have a lot of different ways. But the pre the pre the most basic stuff is probably your best friends on it. So it's gonna be the firewall. Try to separate applications and integrations using different users, using the list. What is it called? The list. The principle of least privilege. It's always a good tip. So try to limit the permissions for each user at the minimum possible to work, and also use the other tools that I mentioned: data masking, column encryption, column level security, row level security, as much as possible to try to reduce the surface area for attacks.
Mm.
So
Can you for better understanding, can you describe a simple example of an Azure SQL driven integration?
sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, a simple example of an Azure SQL driven integration.
Driven integration.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what do you mean? Sorry.
Yeah, what are the new possibilities, with this Azure SQL, yeah, fact that they become more, yeah, that the SQL database can communicate? What can we do with this?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So if you can use the SP evoke REST endpoint, external REST endpoint, you can, for example, let's say I have a form that people um, can write like a contact form, so people can write message, or a feedback form that people can write their opinion in terms of a product, a company, a service, something like this. So it's very hard to read one by one and try to decide if this person is happy, if it's not happy, it's very angry, it's very happy. So you can use the cognitive service, you can use an AI to try to read all these comments and try to classify or score. So we can easily filter, create a number, and based on the number or the score, you can easily select the most happy customers for do some action, marketing action, or some very angry customers that you need to call, need to send a message, send an email, something like this to try to convert these unhappy customers into happy customers again.
Mm,
Um, Another good example, let's say I have an integration with an external application, could be even a file integration that some company drops a file on an FTP or on some storage. I read this data and I import into my database. Sometimes in this kind of integrations, especially when it's using a file like a CSV, a text file, Excel file, you can
Mm,
get a lot of garbage into from the data. uh, let's say if you have a state column and the company was not using a drop down, so
mm,
somebody can use uh, a name for, let's say, New York. You could put N I. You can put, you can type New York wrong. So it's really hard to try uh, to work on this, to remove all this inconsistent data and try to create a standard. So you can use, in the past we had to try to deal with it using code, so it was very painful, especially because I'm just giving one example for one column. Sometimes I have integrations with hundreds, maybe thousands of columns, and you have to try to guess the pattern. You have to try um, to create a code to try to fix that data, to
mm.
clean the data. Now, using AI, you can just use the API, try to fix for you in a few minutes or maybe a few seconds, instead of having to waste maybe days or weeks, maybe months trying to clean that data. So there's unlimited possibility now that you can use AI to work with your data. Let's say I can send emails using this integration. I can connect with, let's say, a SendGrid service that I can use the API to send email from the database. The on-premise database, we can use the DB mail service that you can use with any SMTP service, but we don't have this on Azure SQL DB. But you can use the HTTP request to integrate with different APIs. You can use now um, these integrations to upload a file to a different service. You can say, let's say I want to send a SMS. If I have a service that allows me to to send SMS from an
Mm.
API, I can now send SMS from the database. I can send a WhatsApp message, a Telegram, Slack. So that I can use, for example, I want to monitor my database, and now I can monitor it, sending emails, sending SMS, sending message to any communication platform I'm using to receive these alerts. Could be a monitor of the database itself, or could be a process. If I reach, let's say, I have a product that I sell a lot, and I have less than 10% on my storage, and I want to receive a notification that I need to buy more of these products because I'm gonna be out of stock. And so I can create a job that monitors every, let's say, 5 minutes, one day, I don't know, and send an alert to the buyer or somebody that needs to buy a product. So
Mm.
the possibilities are unlimited.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, we can work with REST APIs. Is there other type of services that can be integrated?
The ad hoc you said?
Yeah, is you have say that your example we have to talk about REST APIs. Is there any other types of services that can be integrated?
Um, Let me think. Any any type of service you're talking about?
Yeah.
Well, I
Um,
think if the service has an API, you can pretty much integrate. So let's say I want to integrate with Teams. I could integrate with Outlook, with the 365 platform.
mm,
I can, because most of the, I think all the platforms in M365, they have an API that you can automate a lot of different stuff. So now I can do this. I can integrate with Office. I can integrate with um, pretty much whole applications with HubSpot. Let's say I use HubSpot as the CRM for my company. I could integrate based on some event that happened on the DB. I can create a task on HubSpot. I can create a lead. I can um, create an invoice. I can do a lot of stuff right now.
Interesting. Yeah. I think yeah, that's Sounds really interesting. Um, can you a little bit about explain the difference between synchronous and asynchronous integration in this context?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to build a synchronous approach on this, you can, let's say, I can create a trigger on a table that's every time, let's say, I insert a row on orders table. So somebody create a new order on the application. I can trigger, and on this trigger, I can send SMS for some
Mm,
to somebody, or I can create a process on HubSpot that I need to now sell this product that I just made. So this is a synchronous process. So as soon as somebody create a new order on the application, without I need to change the application, when this data arrive into the DB already uh, create an action on it.
mm,
I also could create an async approach on this. So when I can create a job that runs daily. So I can read this table. So I can read all this table from what happened on in the last day. And when I
mm,
got this data, let's say I received 10 different orders. And now I can create a summary. I can send an email with the summary of these 10 orders and send to a group or to a group of people to take an action on top of these new orders. If they need to just sell something, if they need to prepare the warehouse or something like this.
mm,
Uh, and now I can work async. I don't need to specifically take an immediate action when this data come. I can also use this integration to query an external API. And then based on the return of this data, I can take another action that I can trigger another API to a different service to do something that I want to do.
mm,
So it's just like you have the power of an application in the database. So you don't need to code anything. You don't need to deploy. You don't need to I don't need to create a CI/CD approach if I don't want. Definitely, I can create a CI/CD approach to deploy these objects to my database, but I don't need to in this case. And because this already runs inside the database, the security concerns are less strict because I don't have anything external connecting to the database. It's already inside the database.
mm,
And the database is actually triggering the integrations. So the database is querying or sending the data to this service. It's not the opposite way. So I don't have a service trying to reach directly to the database. So
mm.
in terms of security, it's a little better in my opinion.
Okay. When we normally talk about SQL, especially in Azure, there are I say some tools we think about. It's Azure Service Bus, Event Grid, Event Hubs, Azure Function, and Logic Apps. W- Is this what role does it play, or is it completely I don't know? Yeah, is it with this new option with this new database? Is it obsolete?
Yeah, I think with this, especially because you can actually schedule jobs inside even the Azure SQL DB. We don't have an interface for it, just like we have for the on-premise or the managed instance. But since let's say 2020, we can schedule jobs. Um, we may we may don't need to use large caps to automate tasks because in the past, if I want to schedule a query, a procedure, or some action on the database, one of the alternatives was to use a large cap. So I could schedule this, and every X minutes or at specific times, the large cap triggers and runs a specific command on the database. Right now, I don't need an orchestrator anymore. Definitely, I can use a Fabric, I can use ADF, I can use Logicap,
Mm.
Power Automate to orchestrate queries and actions on the database.
Mhm.
But you don't need now. You can use, but it's not more required. So because you have options, you have a new options that I don't need an external service to automate executions of um, something, some integration. Uh, because from the database, I can now use APIs. I can now query data from a blob storage directly. So I don't need an orchestrator or an application to deal with different data from coming from different places and try to orchestrate and organize because the database now can do everything.
Mm. I think a lot of companies, when you say you connected a database to external services, I think that immediately raises security questions. What are the biggest risk?
Well, the biggest risk is that the database now can export data directly to a service. So imagine if I can hack into your database, I can build
Mm.
a web service to receive the data that I stole from you. So I can use this integration to get data from your database, post into a web service, and get this data from this database that I hacked.
Mm.
So I understand this concern is really real, but if you can hack into the database, you already have access to all the data anyway. So you can query and save into a file and get the file, upload the file to an FTP. You can just copy all the data uh, to an external application. It can save as a file, can save as a JSON, as a CSV file. So if you can hack into the database, you already has control over the data. So
Mm.
I understand the concern, but I don't see it as an additional layer or an additional thing that you need to protect because to be able to actually send this data outside the database, you have to be inside the database anyway.
Mm. And okay, and how should Azure SQL authenticate to another Azure source?
Using this integration we are talking about.
Yeah.
Uh, well, usually if you can use the anonymous way, but most of service they require some kind of authentication. So you can use bear token, you can use user and password. I think these are the most commons that you can use. Also, you can use headers. So the X API key is pretty common. You pass the token on the header of the request, so we can authenticate the request too. I think these are the three most common way to authenticate, and all of three are supported into the SQL DB. And
Mhm.
it was very it is a very good question though, because I see most of people passing the credential when they are trying to every time they want to make a request, they include the credentials like the token or the password
Mm.
on the request itself. But the
Mm.
most secure way to work with this is that an admin that holds the credentials, this person can create an object called credential on the database. So when you create this object, you actually include the credential itself, like the password, the key, or the token. And when other person wants to work with this service, you can refer it to the credential you created, the object you created. So you don't need to specify the credential anymore. And let's say you have 100 procedures using the same credential. If
Mm.
this token expired, I just run a command alter credential. I use the new token that I created, and all the objects that are referring this credential will automatically be fixed because you don't need to update 100 procedures to update the token. And also is safer because the person that is creating these procedures, that is actually working with this integration, don't need to know the actual token. Only the person that maintain this credential object inside the database.
Mm, mhm. And I don't know. We have to say, I think how did we handle error handle in Azure? S Yeah, how does it work? The error handling, or how did you do it?
Yes. SQL Server and also Azure SQL DB, it supports the begin try, begin catch. So you have a try catch approach
Mm,
on the SQL Server since 2008, 2005, I guess. But definitely it's getting better and better and better over the new versions.
mm,
So with this integrations or any kind of uh, procedure or workflow that you data flow you create on the SQL Server or the SQL DB, you can work with the try catch approach, and based on the error message or the error code, you can also have um, sequential begin try catch. So let's say I try to send this request and I got the message that the service is offline by some reason or some code like error 500. This is an internal issue on the server itself.
mm,
Probably if I try to send again, it will not work. I can use a retry on my catch. So if it fails based on the error code, I can try again, or depending on the error codes, let's say unauthorized, I will not fix the unauthorized error if I try to run again. So I can try to use another credential. I can try to use a fallback service. Like
mm,
say if I send email using SendGrid, by some reason my SendGrid is returning unauthorized. So if it happens, I can try to use the fallback to send the email using Amazon Says or another service.
mm,
So I can deal with that just like in an application. I agree that an application is more powerful in terms of coding and implementing this kind of error handling, but the database is not that far behind. So it has a lot of different controls that you can control an exception. Um, you can record this into a table, into a file, into let's say log analytics on Azure. You can try to use different cases or different ifs approach depending on what happened. So we have a very good error handling on SQL Server.
mm, okay. And what's with the topics performance and scalability? How compares to other SQL solutions?
Um, Performance is a very big topic, especially on Azure, because let's say if you have an on-premise instance or
Mm,
an on-premise server, if you need more performance, you just need to buy more CPUs or buy more memory or buy a faster disk, and it's an investment you pay just once, and you're gonna get the benefits for maybe forever or as soon as your hardware starts to fail. On the cloud is different because you're paying monthly. So if you need to increase the capacity, increase your compute power, probably you're gonna double your costs. And if you don't invest into performance tuning, I can assure to everybody this action to double the compute power, it's not going to be once, because if you don't invest into trying to improve the performance, changing the code, doing better queries, um, implementing a good indexing strategy, this is going to happen once every time you increase the capacity. In a few months is going you have to increase again and again and again, and you're going to see your database costs are going to be very high.
Mm,
So performance is a very big topic. It's a very in cloud, it's getting a lot of attention in the last years because you can reduce costs, improving performance. On premise, this does not happen. If I need a 16 cores server to host my database, and I did an awesome work reducing my query performance by 98%. Now I just need 2 cores. You already bought 16, so you can return. You already bought 16 V cores for the physical hardware and also for the license for SQL Server. So you definitely you're gonna have more. Your lifetime is gonna be higher because you reduce your compute power. You reduce your costs in terms of executing a query. So you don't need to buy more CPUs in a long time now, but you're gonna have still the same costs. In Azure, if you can reduce your cost by 60%, you can reduce your cost by half because you can reduce your the capacity you bought for your database. So now that performance tuning is actually making a difference in how much you're gonna pay, and a good performance could save millions of dollars a year. Now people are getting is giving a lot of attention to people that work with performance tuning.
mm, mm. Interesting. And Microsoft actually we have a Copilot for everything. There's also there one for Azure SQL.
Kind of, more or less, because usually the application that we use in daily basis is the SQL Server Management Studio,
Mhm.
and since the last quarter of last year, they included this option to actually. They didn't call it Copilot, but you can use AI on the tool. Yeah, and you have to use your own key, so it's not included in the price. You
Mm,
have to use your own key for ChatGPT or other platform to kind of have this AI features on your uh, development platform. But SQL Server has some AI features, especially for automatic tuning, that SQL Server keeps analyzing the execution plan all the time to try to suggest new indexes that could benefit your application. Definitely, sometimes you could get good recommendations. Sometimes not that much. If you try to analyze, you could get better results. But definitely, if you don't have a lot of knowledge in terms of performance tuning, um, at least it's an easy guess, easy win. Sometimes it's not the best, but at least it's better than nothing.
mm,
So, and yes, it's strange because you don't have a Copilot for SSMS. Probably because on Copilot, the you don't pay for the usage, the AI usage, right? It's already included in the price.
mm.
In the case of the SQL Server, probably people use this a lot, and Microsoft prefers to, okay, I'm gonna give you this feature. You set up your API key, you select the service, and you can use AI on the development platform.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but when we talk about AI, I think we talk most times about RAG and vector search. How can you will you explain vector search and why is it so becomes so important for AI applications?
Yes. So in the 2025 version of SQL Server, and also in the SQL DB since 2024, if I'm not wrong, SQL Server and Azure SQL DB, they now support vector search and RAG and also embedded in tokens. This is pretty much the foundation of an AI LLM because it uses the embedding tokens to actually um, send all this data to the billions of parameters that the LLMs holds, which pretty much is a bunch of instructions and kind of databases in its own format, very compressed in a way that the LLM can easily access all this data, this knowledge that is stored in forms of these billions of parameters.
Mhm.
And now you can implement your own LLM kind of on the database itself. So you can host your own data. You can use the vector search to try to implement an AI engine, kind of an AI engine on your data without requiring an external service like ChatGPT, Gemini, Anthropic, uh, aka Cloud Code. So you can use the own um, AI engine from SQL Server to try to replicate an LLM
Mm.
on your data. Definitely, it's not going to be as powerful as these big LLMs that runs on huge data center with hundreds of machines, cores, and CPUs and GPUs. But you can have some basic functionalities of LLM without having to pay something to pay an extra cost to the like an AI service that you pay based on a token usage.
Mm.
So it's
Mm.
a way to implement this without no costs. If you understand how it works, the embedding is the vector search.
Awesome. And um, what are you're also a data specialist. What are the capabilities from Azure SQL, especially for your business intelligence?
Yeah. So if you are working with as a business intelligence and Azure SQL DB, Microsoft is pushing everything to Fabric. So Fabric right now is the platform for business intelligence on Microsoft stack because you can have warehouses, lake houses, database.
Mm.
You can have also Power BI is deeply integrated with this platform called Fabric. If you have a data on Azure SQL DB, let's say I have an application and I have a database for this application, and I want to analyze this data on Fabric, aka Power BI. What we had to do in the past, you need to create an ETL pipeline to read this data from the database for the application and copies to a different database, to a different structure, using medallion architecture, something like this, or layers, which we used to call raw ODS and DW layer, and transform all this data, and then you can connect the Power BI on top of this layer.
Mm.
Of course, you can connect Power BI directly to the application database, but it's not recommended. You can have multiple different issues using that approach. It is possible, but not recommended. But now with the SQLDB, it's deeply integrated with Fabric. You can use the Fabric mirroring feature that seamlessly integrate all this data from your application in a near real-time approach to a Fabric warehouse. So you're gonna have this data available for you in near real time on Fabric, so you can plug your dashboards, your reports into this warehouse that is hosted on Fabric, is not using your database capacity. So you're not gonna have any issues just like locks, blocks, or slowness because you're running heavy queries on top of database. You're
Mm.
not running on a database. You're running on the Fabric warehouse. So you're consuming Fabric capacity for it, and you don't need to create an ETL pipeline to get this data from your database to Fabric. Using Fabric mirroring, you can integrate this with just a small number of clicks, and you have this data done on Fabric. And when you have this data on Fabric, then you can apply your transformations and connect into your dashboard or your reports.
Mm.
So yeah, I think this is what Microsoft is pushing right now in terms of the recommendations for the business intelligence approach. In the past, before Fabric, before everything, we used to have an Azure service, reporting service, and integration service, which is also a complete package to have the uh, OLAP cubes for very high performance uh, data tool. So we can connect using Excel or Power BI into a cube. So we're gonna have an in-memory architecture, which is pretty much the analysis service is the heart of Power
Right.
BI still
So,
nowadays. And you also had the integration service, which is the ETL platform, similar to ADF, probably is the father of ADF, the
mm,
integration service. And I think that's pretty much it. What the tools to integrate the Azure SQL DB or SQL Server with a business intelligence platform or pipeline.
yeah, yeah. One question before we start in the rapid fire round. How does governance or how to govern Azure SQL?
Yeah. So how to govern? Okay, the I think is a very good question. Um, Pretty much, if you have a Azure SQL DB, you have a server, right?
Mm,
So in the server, you have the firewall level, the firewall level, the firewall in the server level. So let's say if I manage the server, but I don't manage the databases are managed by the applications. If
mm,
I block a certain IP at the server level, this IP will not be able to access this database. Or I can do the opposite. I can block all the IPs and create an allow list. So only certain IPs could access my server itself.
right.
I also have a database level firewall. So let's say I'm allowing all IPs at the server level, but at the database level, I'm allowing only certain IPs to access this specific database. Let's say I have an HR database. Usually, it contains very sensitive information like salary and personal data. Um, I can have a server that allows all IPs, but for this specific database, I want to be able to access only from one IP, which is the application IP. So I can set up um, this kind of security per database, or also at the entire server level that hosts different a lot of different databases. Also, in terms of security, I can create a login at the server level, and then for this login, I can specify in which databases this login can access. So I have control over the server itself, and also everything that I can manage. I can also have granular permissions on the database itself. So I can have on one server different app databases with different um, business rules, different security concerns that I can manage at the database level. So, in terms of governance, we have a lot of different tools that we can apply to the database itself.
Mm, yeah, interesting. So well, we're running a little bit over time. I'm sorry for this.
Yours.
I hope you have some seconds for the rapid fire round. I ask some questions. You give an answer. So, rational data or vector data,
Our relational database for sure.
SQL or Python,
SQL,
store procedure or external service,
That's hard. Um, External service.
A service bus or event grid?
Isn't good.
Um, when Satya and Idalia come to you and say, "Hey, Nico, you get all the money and uh, resources from Microsoft to develop the Azure SQL feature," what will it be?
Well, first of all, I will try to implement an active cluster because Oracle has the Oracle hack, and I think it would be good to have more than one point of writing. And we don't have this in SQL Server because we have only active and passive replicas. So we cannot have more than one instance running at the same time. Usually, just one receive the writes, and the others just receive the replications.
Mm.
So I think this would be probably my first thing to try to implement because um, yeah, I think it will be something like this, an active cluster.
Yeah, awesome. And if you, who or which should be the next guest I should invite to the podcast, and what questions should I ask?
I think you should invite Fabiano Morin. I don't know if you know him. He's
No?
a specialist in terms of SQL Server and performance and also security. Um, he already hacked all the clouds, the SQL Server in all the clouds. He discovered a lot of vulnerabilities in every cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba. And I think it will be a very interesting chat with him.
Mm. Yeah, and then my final question is, what do you want listeners to remember from this session?
I think what we talk about at most, and it's very interesting, and I think is not very explored by people that use the Azure SQL is the integration from the database to external service, which now open unlimitless possibilities and ports because now the database is not a place that you can just store your data. You can actually be more active without requiring an application or an external service to orchestrate or to command what the database should do. Now the database is alive. It has its own responsibilities, its own um its own tasks that it could do and
Mm.
in an easily way because you don't need to deploy to code to create an application to host this, to create a server to host this. It's already there.
Yeah, so Dikro, thank you for joining me and showing us the Azure SQL database. Can be much more than a place where application stores data. My biggest takeaway from this conversion is that modern database architecture is, yeah, increasingly about connections. Azure SQL can participate in API integrations, automation workflows, analytic solutions, AI-powered experience. But these capabilities must be implemented with care, full attention, and to security, reliable performance, and operational visibility. Yeah, the goal is not to move every part of an application in a database. The goal is to understand when keeping logic close to trust business data creates a simpler, faster, and more, yeah, maintainable solution. And when we decided to integration services is, yeah, better, uh, the better architectural choice. So thank you for being here. All your infos the guests find in the show notes. You from this episode on the MC65 FM podcast page. So yeah, thank you so much for staying here with me. More than an hour. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for everybody that's listening to us all this time. I hope you enjoyed the topics and what we discuss here. Thank you for everything.